Thank you very much, Joe. Happy Sabbath, everybody. I want to start off by wishing my mom and my grandma a happy Mother's Day. I'm not quite sure if they're watching live, and if they were here, maybe I'd embarrass them a little bit more. I'll still call them tomorrow either way. This week, Kendall and I finished a semester of school. I finished my last semester, and Kendall finished her 11th out of 19 college semesters. I call that crazy. She calls it learning, whatever you want to call it. One of the things that you probably all remember about finishing a semester of school is the joy of your last day. Elementary school, middle school, high school, college, anytime you finish your exams, have a weight lifted off your shoulders, and feel the accomplishment of a semester of hard work, the joy of finishing changes your whole mindset. You can be 40, 50, 60, or 70 years old and still probably remember the last day of your senior year of high school. In our home, Kendall and I have had a lot of joy with classes being done. But the few weeks before that, the amount of time it takes to close out a semester, it really fills our minds and attitudes with thoughts other than joy. The busyness, anxiety, and general cloudy feelings that come along with closing out a semester, they take a toll on you. Really, throughout the whole year, we see this ebb and flow of the joys and the lows of general life. Today, I want to focus on joy, not just happiness, but I want to talk about the feeling you get in your stomach and your chest when you're overwhelmed with positive emotions. While I want to talk some about joy as a concept, my specific purpose for this message is to discuss joy as a decision rather than as an outcome. I believe that joy is a pretty simple concept. If babies can understand joy, then adults and children probably can too. Because of this, I'm going to focus on 3 simple scriptures today that instruct joy without making it complicated. Now, they are short verses, so you may feel gypped that I'm having you turn your pages for a 2 to 12 word verse. But I kept them all in the New Testament, so it won't be too much turning for you. Let's start with 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 16. 1 Thessalonians 5:16. The New Testament is a great resource to lift the spirits and fill yourself with joy. Whether it is Jesus spreading the good news or one of his disciples writing encouraging letters to churches and friends, there are great themes of positivity, forward thinking, and joy. 1 Thessalonians 5:16, rejoice always. I told you these would be short, but let's think about it. Paul instructs Thessalonica to rejoice always, pray without ceasing, and in everything give thanks. He doesn't say, rejoice when something good happens and be cranky all the time outside of that. It's simple, direct, and still impactful. Rejoice always. I like simple messages. It's like when your head is crowded with thoughts and different to-dos that you have, and you write them down all on a list in your notepad. You may feel overwhelmed with everything floating around, but when you write it down, it seems actionable and attainable. This verse rubs me the same way. How should I react? With joy. What should I say? Joyful words. How will this look? It will look joyful. If I just rejoice always, then I don't have to think too hard. All I have to do is react with joy. Let's turn over to another verse in the New Testament, James chapter 1 and verse 2. James 1 verse 2. I love these short verses because there's really no room for misinterpretation. I'm probably not going to have someone tell me that I shouldn't rejoice always. This scripture in James comes right after his greetings to open the letter. Then right up front, James says, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. James wants the 12 tribes to count it joy because trials produce patience, and patience creates a person who lacks nothing. James cuts right to the point. There's no precursor here. This is the first thing that the tribes see when they open this letter. He said that if you are hit with trials, a bad day, a bad week, or a poor circumstance, The patience that you grow from there should bring you joy. Of course, James is not saying to jump with joy whenever something negative happens. He's saying to count it joy that you are still walking, growing, and getting to experience life. Now let's turn to my third verse and my personal favorite verse, Philippians chapter 2, verse 14. Philippians 2:14. And I've got a little story associated with this one. When I was 14 years old at summer camp, I had a camp counselor who had a longer than usual discussion with our dorm the first night. When you're 14 and you get to camp, you don't want to be sat down by your counselor and talked to. When you're a 14-year-old boy and you get to camp, you want to see your friends, play basketball, and flirt with girls. But the first night this talk was one of the few things I remember from camp that year. The one verse this discussion centered around was Philippians 2:14, and with this verse, my counselor set the tone that was expected for the whole week while establishing a baseline with the scripture. So Philippians 2:14, do all things without complaining and disputing. Short, simple, sweet, and to the point. Now, my dad has a different version of this that he likes to tell me. Quit whining, Nancy. Although it may not have the exact same sentiment, it still holds a similar meaning to me and will always ring forever in my mind. I love Philippians 2:14 because it shows that the lack of negativity, or simply positivity, is a choice. Paul wants all of us to bear our light and not get dragged down into, as he says, the crooked and perverse generation. I can get beat down at work and let that drain the joy and positivity in my life, or I can do all these things without complaining and disputing. Some people do this by comparing their sorrows to others to make their issues feel more manageable, or other people's experience. Sometimes people weigh on their own experiences and say, I'm still able to smile today so I can get through it. This lack of complaining leads to joy, and joy is infectious. My favorite example of joy being infectious is the hymn, There is Joy in My Heart. This is really the whole reason the sermonette came to mind to me. The last time that I remember singing There is Joy in My Heart, I was smiling, and there's just feelings of happiness. It's really hard to sing There is Joy in My Heart. There is joy in my heart, knowing Christ will come again. It just doesn't happen that way. You're all laughing at me right now because that just seems ridiculous. To wrap this up, joy is infectious and joy is a choice. When we come to church each week, I always see happiness, positive tones, smiling eyes, and just general good conversations and feelings of joy. Of course, positive events will increase your joy and poor circumstances will test your joy. But in the end, when we look positively at life and choose joy, we lead happier and healthier lives.